There are moments in the Cold War that remain unresolved, not because they were unimportant, but because what happened was never fully understood. No clear answer, no confirmed explanation, only fragments, signals, and silence. In May of 1968, one of the most advanced submarines in the United States Navy vanished. No distress call, no warning, no sign of what went wrong. One moment, it was operating in the Atlantic. The next, it was gone. This is the story of the submarine that disappeared during the Cold War, the USS Scorpion, and the mystery that followed it into the depths. At the height of the Cold War, submarines were among the most critical assets in the U.S. military. They operated where no other system could, hidden beneath the ocean, undetected, capable of tracking adversaries, gathering intelligence, and, if necessary, delivering devastating force. They were part of a strategy built on invisibility, because what could not be found, could not be stopped. The USS Scorpion was one of those submarines, a fast attack submarine, designed for speed, maneuverability, and deep-sea operations. It represented the cutting edge of undersea warfare, equipped with advanced sonar, weapon systems, and the ability to operate far from home for extended periods. Its mission wasn't just combat, it was surveillance, tracking Soviet naval activity, monitoring movements, maintaining awareness in a domain where information was limited. In 1968, the Cold War was entering a particularly tense period. Both the United States and the Soviet Union were expanding their naval capabilities. Submarines on both sides were becoming more advanced, more capable, and more active. The oceans had become a hidden battlefield, one where encounters were rarely seen, but constantly possible. The USS Scorpion had been deployed in this environment, operating in the Atlantic, carrying out its mission as part of that invisible conflict. But as its patrol came to an end, something changed. Communication became limited, then irregular, then silent. At first, there was no immediate alarm. Submarines often operated without constant contact. Silence was part of their mission. But as time passed, that silence became something else, concerning. Because even in covert operations, there were expected check-ins, expected signals. And when those signals didn't come, questions began to form. The Navy initiated attempts to establish contact, repeated calls, different channels. No response. The realization came slowly. Then, all at once, the USS Scorpion was missing. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where the most critical events are the ones that leave questions behind, consider subscribing, because what happened next was not just a search for a submarine. It was a search for answers, in a place where answers are not easily found. Because somewhere beneath the Atlantic, something had happened, and no one knew why. The search began quietly. At first, it was controlled, measured, because there was still uncertainty. Submarines could lose contact temporarily. Delays happened. Signals could be missed. But as hours turned into days, and days into weeks, the situation became clear. This was no longer a communication problem. The USS Scorpion was lost. The United States Navy mobilized its resources, ships, aircraft, listening stations across the Atlantic, all focused on one objective: find the submarine. But the ocean is vast, and a submarine does not leave a visible trace. There were no debris fields on the surface, no oil slick, no signal, only open water. The search area was enormous, thousands of square miles, and the deeper they looked, the more difficult it became. Because at those depths, the ocean hides everything. Light does not reach, visibility disappears, and recovery becomes a challenge unlike anything on land. But the Navy had one advantage, a system that had been designed for a different purpose: the sound surveillance system. Underwater listening arrays positioned across the ocean, originally built to detect submarine movements, to track sound, propellers, machinery, anything that could be heard beneath the surface. Now, that system would be used in a different way, not to track movement, but to search for a moment, a single event. Because if something had happened to the Scorpion, it might have produced a sound, an implosion, an explosion, a signature that could be detected, recorded, stored. Analysts began reviewing the data, hours of recordings, looking for anything unusual, anything that stood out. And then they found something, a series of sounds. Sharp, distinct, out of place, signals that suggested a catastrophic event. But interpreting those sounds was not simple, because underwater acoustics are complex. Sound travels differently. Distances distort perception. Timing becomes difficult to measure. Still, the data provided a starting point, a location, not exact, but narrow enough to focus the search. Ships were redirected, search patterns adjusted, equipment deployed to scan the ocean floor, slowly, carefully, because now the mission had changed. It was no longer about finding a submarine that might be operational. It was about locating a wreck. And understanding what had happened, the search moved deeper, into areas rarely explored, where pressure increases beyond what most structures can withstand, where recovery becomes almost impossible. And yet, the effort continued, because this wasn't just about a vessel. It was about the crew, the lives lost, and the need to understand, because without understanding, the risk remained. And in a system where submarines operated constantly, that risk could not be ignored. Eventually, after weeks of searching, something appeared. On sonar, an anomaly, a shape that didn't belong. At a depth of more than 3,000 meters, the USS Scorpion was found, broken, resting on the ocean floor. But finding it was only the beginning, because the real question still remained. What had caused it? And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where even the most advanced systems can face the unknown, consider subscribing, because what investigators would discover next would only deepen the mystery, because the evidence was there, but the answers were not. Reaching the wreck was one thing. Understanding it was something else entirely, because at that depth, the ocean doesn't preserve clearly. It distorts, it compresses, it hides. Cameras were sent down, slowly descending into darkness, thousands of meters below the surface, where pressure crushes everything not built to withstand it, where visibility is limited to what artificial light can reveal. And when the USS Scorpion finally came into view, it wasn't a single, intact vessel. It was debris, sections of the submarine scattered across the ocean floor, the hull broken, the structure compromised. Clear evidence that something catastrophic had occurred. But what kind of event could do that? That became the central question. Investigators studied every image, every angle, every fragment, looking for patterns, looking for clues. Because in an environment like that, the evidence doesn't speak clearly. It has to be interpreted. One possibility was an internal malfunction, a failure within the submarine itself, a mechanical issue, a systems breakdown. Because even the most advanced machines are not immune to failure, especially under extreme conditions. Another possibility was a weapon, a torpedo, either accidental or unintended, because submarines carry their own weapons, systems that must be handled with precision. Any malfunction could have devastating consequences. There were also theories involving external factors, an encounter, a collision, something beyond the control of the crew. But there was no clear evidence of another vessel, no definitive sign of external damage consistent with an attack. Still, the uncertainty remained, because the Cold War environment added another layer to every possibility. Soviet submarines were operating in the same regions, tracking, listening, engaging in their own missions. Could there have been an interaction, an encounter that escalated or went wrong? There was no confirmation, no direct evidence. But in the absence of clear answers, theories persisted. At the same time, the acoustic data was reanalyzed, the sound that had been detected, the sequence, the timing. Some interpretations suggested an internal event, followed by rapid hull collapse, an implosion under pressure, a chain reaction that left little chance for survival. But even that conclusion carried uncertainty, because the data could be interpreted in different ways. And without direct observation of the moment itself, there was no absolute answer. That was the reality investigators faced. Evidence without certainty, clues without confirmation, and a timeline that could be reconstructed, but not fully explained. For the United States Navy, this created a difficult position because understanding the cause wasn't just about the past. It was about the future. If the loss was due to a design flaw, it had to be corrected. If it was operational, procedures had to change. Because submarines continued to operate, missions continued, and the risks remained. But without a definitive cause, there was no single solution, only adjustments, precautions, improvements based on probability, not certainty. And if you're interested in Cold War stories like this, where even most advanced technology can leave unanswered questions, consider subscribing, because what this investigation revealed was something deeper than a single incident. It revealed the limits of knowledge, even in a system built on precision. Because sometimes, even when you find a wreck, you still don't find the answer. In the end, the USS Scorpion became something more than a lost submarine. It became a question that was never fully answered. A reminder that even in a system built on precision, control, and advanced technology, there are limits. Because despite the search, despite the analysis, despite the evidence gathered from the ocean floor, no single explanation could be confirmed with certainty. There were conclusions, assessments, theories supported by data, but not one that could close the case completely. And in the Cold War, uncertainty carried weight, because this wasn't just about understanding the past. It was about protecting the future. Submarines continued to operate, missions continued, crews continued to deploy into the same environment, the same depths, the same conditions. And every unanswered question meant one thing: risk. For the United States, the response was not to wait for certainty. It was to adapt. Procedures were reviewed, systems examined, safety measures strengthened, because even without a definitive answer, the responsibility remained to reduce risk, to improve reliability, to ensure that what happened to Scorpion would not happen again. That response reflected something fundamental. That strength is not just measured in capability, but in how a system reacts to failure, how it learns, how it adjusts, how it continues forward. At the same time, the loss of the Scorpion remained deeply personal. A crew that never returned, a mission that ended without warning, a silence that was never broken. And beneath the surface of the Atlantic, the submarine remains, a fixed point in a history defined by movement, by tension, by constant activity, but also by moments like this. Moments where even the most advanced systems encounter the unknown. Because the Cold War was not just a contest of power. It was a contest of understanding, of information, of control. And sometimes, control was incomplete. That is a legacy of the USS Scorpion. Not just a loss, but a lesson that even in an era of technological superiority, there are environments that resist certainty, and events that leave questions behind. For more stories like this, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because some of the most important moments in history are not defined by what we know, but by what we are still trying to understand.